My name is Karen Rees and I'm an independent safeguarding consultant undertaking quite a few SARs now, safeguarding adult reviews with Teesside Safeguarding Adults Board. And the last SAR we did identified quite a few issues around professional curiosity. So the board asked if I would do this session at the beginning of Safeguarding Adults Week, just to try and give you a little bit more support and understanding about safeguarding adults using professional curiosity. So I'm going to turn my camera off and I'm going to start a screen share of a PowerPoint presentation, which hopefully you'll see very shortly. Just start the slideshow.
Sorry, can I just check, will the PowerPoint be emailed out to us?
I'll let Sam answer that.
If you're happy for it to be shared, Karen, I'm more than happy to send it out. So
yeah, and the last slide's got some resources on, so yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay, so just a bit about this afternoon and the etiquette for this online session. If you, rather than doing introductions, because there's a lot of us on the call, if we all did introductions, we'd be a bit stuck for time. So if you could pop your name and role in the chat box. But also, what I'd also like you to do is have a look at the emojis that come up when you're typing and consider what's your favourite emoji and pop that in the chat as well. Just as a bit of an icebreaker and something to give me a smile later when I'm looking back over the chat. That would be nice. If you could all mute your microphones. I'm happy for you to be on camera or not on camera. We're not having questions until the end of the sessions. I'll come to that in a second. So you don't need to be on camera if you don't want to be, or if you want to be on camera, you can be. I don't mind. I'm staying off camera while I'm presenting just because of my connection issues. If I could ask that you turn off all distractions so that you can be present and attentive during this session. If you want to get the best out of this session, then being present and attentive is the best way to be around that, I think, because the session will move on quite swiftly, and I'd hate for you to miss anything. If you've got any questions that arise during my presentation, if you pop them in the chat box and then we can answer those at the end. Our last sort of 15 minutes of the session you'll be separated into breakout rooms and you'll have a chance to look at the SAR that we've just published. I say we, that's the royal we, and I've got some scenario questions for you to consider that focus around professional curiosity. Those two items are in the chat at the moment, so you should be able to access them. But towards the end of my speaking, if you can't access them, then Sam will share them again. I think that's all from an etiquette perspective. So the outcomes for today, what I'd like you to know by the end of the day is to understand a bit more about professional curiosity. I think that most of you will have a good concept and understanding about what professional curiosity is, but we want to deepen that understanding. Want to consider with you the enablers and barriers. So what stops professionals and practitioners and anyone in the workforce being professionally curious? What we think your role is in professional curiosity, and what we believe your organisation's role is in professional curiosity, because believe it or not, your organisation has a lot to do with allowing you to be professionally curious. And then we're going to look at the application in practice using a scenario from the most recent Safeguarding Adult Review. So what is professional curiosity? All my reading around professional curiosity does identify that there isn't actually a clear definition. The concept did start in safeguarding children, and I'm originally a safeguarding children practitioner, having been a paediatric nurse and moved on through those roles. So I was aware of professional curiosity for a long time before safeguarding adults had even come to the fore, really. If any of you that have been working for a long time will know that safeguarding adults didn't really feature in, until much later. The previous Safeguarding Adult Review analysis has recognised and made recommendations regarding professional curiosity. So I'm not going to read all of that data out, but basically when we look at a review of those SARs, there is a huge number that make explicit references to professional curiosity, but the second national analysis of safeguarding adult reviews again points out that professional curiosity is really crucial in safeguarding practice. And the SAR analysis identifies that a lot of safeguarding adult reviews are saying there's a lack of professional curiosity. So we need to understand that a bit more. And it emphasises the need for professionals to have that curious mindset, particularly around safeguarding. So that's why we're looking at this in more detail this afternoon. So there's loads of different definitions of professional curiosity, and I just think, well, does it really matter? Well, I think as long as we know what it is, we can move on. This definition was one I came across, and I don't think, I don't think it's particularly helpful. It sort of does what it says on the tin, but I think the Safeguarding Adult Board briefing I keep going on too quickly. The briefing actually is a good definition, and I think that's been compiled from several different definitions. But I also think we should use this in the TSAB area because we're all working together, we're all collaborating together. So it's good for us to understand in the Tees wide area, what is it that people are wanting as a definition and what we think that definition should look like. So I'm not going to read it out because it's been on the screen for quite a while now, but it's to do with acknowledging gut feelings, asking the why questions, and testing out your assumptions. So they're some of the key features of that. So what are the blocks and barriers to professional curiosity? And I think if we understand these, then we get a much better idea of why it can be so tricky and why safeguarding adult reviews are pointing out that that we've got that issue. So disguised compliance, again, some of these things come from children's safeguarding, but we know a lot more about this in safeguarding adults now. And these blocks and barriers and case issues we discussed in the learning event we had for the Safeguarding Adult Review that I've been talking about. And, I was really interested in, if we are saying professional curiosity is important, what stops professionals being professionally curious? Because nobody wants to not be curious, but what's stopping it? And actually these some of these and other ones that we're going to look at later did come up, and the professionals did identify some of these. So what is disguised compliance? That's where a person appears to be wanting support. So they're saying all the right things. They're agreeing to go to appointments. They're agreeing for assessments. They're agreeing to take certain actions. But actually, when you go back and review, nothing's changed. And they're very nice about it. But actually, when you look at a whole range of things together, you recognise that they haven't really done what they said they were going to. The risk hasn't gone down. The risk is actually increasing. And so therefore, that's disguised compliance because they're saying one thing and doing another. Knowing but not knowing. This is about where that gut feeling issue comes in. So you're feeling when you're talking to to a person, or you're carrying out an assessment, or you're just observing on a visit, that you're just feeling something's not right, but you can't put your finger on it. And you can shy away from that without evidence. So you can think, well, I've got no evidence about this, so I can't really do anything with it. So it's important, and we'll talk a bit more about how you gather that evidence so that it becomes more than a gut feeling, but you've got evidence to underpin your gut feeling. Recognition of risk accumulation, that's where we might start a safeguard. I mean, we're talking about safeguarding. So we might start a safeguarding conversation. We might start a safeguarding referral. We might start an investigation. It concludes, it closes, things are a little bit better, or it's being signposted elsewhere. 6 weeks later, another referral comes in and the same thing happens. Now, if we don't recognise each of those situations and look at the accumulating risk, then we're not going to see the bigger picture. So there's something about either when you're making a referral, when you're receiving a referral for safeguarding, or you're having safeguarding conversations with other professionals, talk about what's gone before. And do your systems have ways of flagging previous safeguarding, so that when you're concerned about something, or when you're referring in something, or you're receiving a referral, you can look at systems and think, oh, we've had this issue before, rather than just recognising it as a first time. The rule of optimism, that's similar really, and it's a belief that the practitioner, you're allowing or encouraging that strengths-based and risk enablement approach, which there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're not seeing the overall picture and not asking the right questions, you may be missing that there's a higher risk than you believe there is. And that needs often a full and robust case analysis, so you can really see whether things are as they appear, or whether there's something else and the risk is again accelerating. These are the blocks and barriers that we call practitioner issues. So this is where you may be struggling with something in a particular case. So the first one is normalization. And that can often occur. Again, it's a bit linked to where you might have be trying to encourage a strengths-based approach and autonomy. So, for example, you may have someone who has dementia, and their natural behaviour and part of their dementia symptoms is their walking behaviour, their walking with purpose. Now, generally, if the community are looking out for that person and can return them home, and we've got an example in the Safeguarding Adult Review where the police returned a lady home regularly, but that information was never shared, and they weren't curious enough. The police weren't curious enough to know or to think about what might happen if they didn't find her and take her home. So eventually, unfortunately, she did walk with purpose on a cold winter's night. She wasn't found and returned home, and unfortunately she had died from hypothermia. Also, another type of normalisation is where, for example, you may be working in a very deprived inner city area, and there's quite a lot of deprivation, and you begin to normalise how people are living and don't necessarily see the risks, because most of the homes you visit look similar, so there might not be enough food or enough heating and light, and particularly with the issues that we've got with austerity measures and things, people, it can become normalised. And I remember this when I was health visiting, where I was working with some practitioners who were working in a very deprived area of a big city, and it was really interesting to read their records and what they'd written, and hadn't recognised that there was some significant neglect going on. But they were saying, but that's how it is round here. So that sort of normalisation. So there needs to be more professional curiosity around the question of yourselves, really. Am I normalizing what's happening? Is there a risk? Do I need to find out more information? Do I need to question my own curiosity around this? Professional deference, that's a tricky one again, really. What we say about professional curiosity and really understanding risk and really understanding the person is the person who knows them best. Now, sometimes, so take, for example, we've got a scenario where there's a paid carer going in every day and gets to know a person really, really well. When it comes to raising concerns, it could be that they are swayed by a professional who's seen as a higher status. So that you may have the person who knows and maybe the least, and I say this qualified in inverted commas because I don't see it like that, but you could see how a more senior professional say, no, it's fine. Or no, we've assessed that already and it's absolutely okay. So professional deference is something we need to question. The other thing that can block professional curiosity is confirmation bias. And that may be where you filter out new information or that you're not expecting to see something, so you don't. So, for example, let's say we have elderly frail person is being hoisted in a care home or at home, hoisted regularly, and there are bruises. But you are aware that as a very frail elderly person, they may well bruise easily. Someone says, but, these happen while they're being hoisted, or where there are other moving and handling issues or issues with someone who's got very complex behaviour that challenges, and there is bruising. Are we just assuming that those marks have occurred through normal caring and not through any sort of abuse? And also another one that still sticks in my mind a lot around confirmation bias. So a safeguarding adult review I did that is actually unpublished in another area of the country, young lady with profound learning difficulties, disabilities, and was unable to communicate very much, spent her life between home being cared for by mum and stepdad and day centre, had respite at the day centre as well at weekends. And she starts to display, she has quite a lot of constipation problems and her abdomen starts to become distended. And the last thing that anyone considered was that she could be pregnant because she's not sexually active. She doesn't have any relationships where she might be being sexually active. So pregnancy just didn't enter their heads. And I could see when it became obvious that she was pregnant, the shock and horror that could have happened. But it was the last thing they considered. So confirmation bias there would be, well, she can't be pregnant, so it doesn't even enter the psyche to think that she was pregnant. And then lack of confidence in managing tension. We're going to talk a bit more about difficult conversations later on, but I think it can be a block and barrier if you've got someone who's very challenging, so a client or a carer who's very challenging, and particularly where there might be aggression and violence, it can be really difficult to have those difficult conversations and to be professionally curious. So you can see that, these things are not easy and nobody's expecting them to be easy. So when we look at organisational issues with professional curiosity, there's two main things that we think about. One is the supervision that you as practitioners are getting adequate enough? Do you have enough time and space? Do you feel confident in the supervision you're receiving? Are you clear about the confidentiality boundaries within supervision? Are you given time for critical reflection? And does your supervisor challenge you in a professional way to think outside of the box? I mean, supervision should be planned. It should be an accountable process. It should be a two-way process that supports you and motivates you. Different models of supervision, though, are seen in different organisations. So, for example, in my background in health, supervision wasn't necessarily around about safeguarding. So the supervision would be clinical supervision and management supervision. So doctors would have clinical supervision with their peers. They would, health practitioners have clinical supervision. They also have managerial supervision with their line manager. And then there may be, for some parts of the organisation that have a lot of involvement with safeguarding, they may have separate safeguarding supervision. So think about what your organisation's supervision looks like, and is it adequate for your needs? Does it encourage you to be professionally curious? Do you have the opportunity to have multidisciplinary team meetings with other organisations where you look at complex cases from a supervision perspective? Changes in practitioner. This is one that most organisations are facing difficulties with. And this is where retention and recruitment may be difficult, or that people naturally just move on. Now, we know that the evidence suggests, particularly in trauma-informed practice and in trauma-informed cases where you're working with someone who's experienced trauma in their life, that you need time to build a relationship. And it is by being professionally curious that you're able to find out about the trauma that a person might have lived through in their younger life or even in their adult life. If there's a constant change of practitioner, then we get that start again syndrome. And you can find that people don't want to share because they feel let down because the worker that they were working with has moved on. So we ask organisations, and I asked managers this morning, you know, what do you do to ensure that your staff are happy? Is there an open culture? Is there continuing professional development available? Professional curiosity takes time, and you can't build a picture of a person in a one-off visit. So if there's a constant churn in the workforce, then that can be really difficult. Do you as a member of staff feel valued and respected? So in an organisation where none of that is happening, then changes in practitioners can become an issue for and a block and barrier to professional curiosity. So the other area that can really be a barrier for professional curiosity is pressure and complexity. So you find that on top of everything else that you're dealing with, you've got high workloads and maybe a pressure to close cases. Now, that pressure to close cases may come from management, or it may come from yourself because you're thinking, I need to get this one closed because I'm aware of everything else that's in my inbox and my work tray, and I need to be moving on with these things. You're unlikely to feel like you want to have difficult conversations and employ respectful challenge and concerned curiosity where you've got that high workload and pressure to close. So, and like I said, is that coming from yourself internally? Question yourself, reflect, and see if that's how things are for you. Or is it coming from managers? In both cases, if they're blocks and barriers, then you need to talk about it and escalate it. If your high workload means that you're having a hurried approach, it's less likely that a person will want to tell you more because they'll believe you're not interested in their story. So if you're constantly looking at your watch, or you know that you need to be somewhere else very soon, then you know that could be really difficult for yourself and for the person you're with. And also, what if someone has refused help? So they've got mental capacity, they've turned down an assessment, they've turned down a service. Within yourself, are you thinking a slight relief because you can move to the next case? And it is, let's face it, much easier to work with someone who's motivated and wants help and support. So all of these things are nobody's fault. They are the nature of the caring professions, and therefore we are likely to feel some of this at times. The other real challenge for yourselves as professionals is trying to weigh up a person's autonomy versus safeguarding. So balancing that professional curiosity with respecting the person's privacy is crucial in safeguarding. Are you being seen as being nosy? Is it any of your business to be asking some of these questions? So these bullet points here are some of the strategies that you might use to balance that autonomy and privacy versus safeguarding. So set clear boundaries. You need to be clear about the boundaries of your role and the information that you need to know. And also that be really clear that that's because you want to ensure safety. So that helps asking the relevant questions without feeling that you're overstepping. Informed consent then. So wherever possible, talk to people about consent when you're asking about information. So that might be asking the person themselves or might be asking other professionals. Explain why you're having to ask certain questions and how that information will be used, so that you're not going to go sit on the bus and discuss it with your neighbour, that actually it's for a purpose and you're seeking informed consent to be able to get them the best support that they can. Respectful inquiry, approach questions with sensitivity and use open-ended questions. Don't lead people down a certain line of inquiry. Allow individuals to share information at their own pace. Some people, like I said before, might take some time to share some of this information, which is why you need to build those relationships. You're not going to get everything you need in a first encounter. Confidentiality links to informed consent. So be really clear with people that you're not going to share this information everywhere, that you'll only share it with people where it's necessary and for those that need to know. Training. Have you had up-to-date training on data protection? Because one of the things we find in safeguarding adult reviews is that professionals didn't share information because they thought they couldn't because of the Data Protection Act. Actually, if you've got a concern about someone's safeguarding and someone's safety and there's a risk of harm, you can share information with professionals who need to know that information in order to support you to safeguard someone. Reflective practice, this links with supervision and support as well. We've talked a bit about, how often do you get time to be reflective? So that's really important as well. And are you getting that regular supervision? And what are you doing if you're not? And how are you ensuring that you're getting that the right level of supervision? Or is it that you're cancelling your supervision because of the pressure of workload? So do you get in the ever increasing or decreasing spiral of, I can't have supervision because I'm too busy, so I can't have supervision. But actually then you're not resolving some of those cases that you're not finding the answers for. So again, it's important to consider all of that. But like everything else, professional curiosity on its own is not the answer to better safeguarding. It has to be linked in with information sharing. But you can't just share information from what you found out when you've been fabulously professionally curious. You share that information. That's not the end of the process. So you share what you've found out, but then you have to collaborate with other professionals, because you're unlikely to be able to apply that professional curiosity by yourself and improve outcomes for people. So you can see in the best outcomes is being professionally curious and finding that information, particularly about your gut feelings and what you think you're seeing and what you think you're not seeing. Then sharing the information, but then collaborating together, and that's where you'll get best outcomes for people. So what are those steps to being professionally curious? Now, I've taken these from the Safeguarding Adult Board briefing, which is on the Safeguarding Adult Board's website, and I've done that deliberately because I don't want to be confusing you with different labels, because each safeguarding board has a slightly different way of putting the same thing. So look, what are you seeing? When you meet an adult and family, what is it that prompts you questions? What is it that makes you feel uneasy? Are you observing anything that indicates abuse or neglect? Does what you see and support contradict what you're being told by the person or even by other professionals? And what we've started to add much more into professional curiosity now is ask why. Ask yourself why. Why am I feeling like this? Ask the person you're assessing why. Why are you feeling that way? Then listen. Listen to what you're being told. And sometimes those silences are really important, because that's where a person might start to fill in some of your gaps. Are you concerned about what you hear family members say to each other? So it may be a family together, it may be a family and a connected carer, so somebody that's related to the person, so living in the same household, or a family member that's coming to look after the person. You know, is someone in the family trying to tell you something, but they're finding it difficult to express themselves? So are they talking around the issue rather than hitting the nail on the head? Ask. You've got to ask those questions. Are there direct questions that you ask when you meet an adult and family which give you the information about your vulnerability? What do you need to ask? So asking things like, how do you spend your day? Who do you live with? When was the last time you felt happy? How did you get that injury? And I think this is a really interesting one. And if you've worked with domestic abuse very much, you'll know that people really worry about asking where you got that injury from. Where did you get that bruise from, that bruised eye from? But actually, if you've had a visit from a professional and you're a victim of abuse and neglect, whether that be a domestic abuse or abuse outside of the family, and you're not asked, then afterwards you're left thinking, I've got a great big bruise on my eye. Why did nobody ask me how I got that? Ask about, you know, who is this with you? So if someone turns up to an appointment and they've got someone with them, or you arrive at a home visit and there is someone there, don't ignore them. They could be a significant person in that person's life. And then you can ask things like, when do you feel safe? When do you feel safest? And then ask why. Why is it that you feel safe at night and not in the day? Then you must clarify and triangulate. And this is where professional curiosity is a real challenge for professionals, because you need to think about, how much do I need to triangulate this? Do I believe what I'm being told? Do I not believe what I'm being told? Are other professionals involved? Have other professionals seen the same as you or not? Are others concerned? And if so, what action has already been taken? So that's thinking about, have there been previous safeguarding issues here? Has somebody already done something about this? Am I just coming late to the party? Are professionals being told the same or different things? And I'm just preparing for a learning event I'm doing next week for a gentleman that died in a house fire. And what's becoming obvious as I read all the information is that different professionals were being told different things. And I don't think, from everything I've read about this gentleman, I don't think he was deliberately trying to put people off, but I think there was either cognitive problems that people hadn't picked up on, or he was deliberately trying to change people's view of what he was saying. So, for example, a bladder and bowel specialist nurse went out to assess him and offered him a commode to hopefully help him with his continence, because he was struggling to get to the toilet because of his frailty and his mobility. But when the social worker, he declined that. He said no, he didn't need that. He was absolutely fine. When the social worker visited, he told the social worker that he was having a commode and that the nurse had been to see him and he was going to have a commode, and that would make things much easier for him. So you can see why it's important to triangulate and think about, all together. That's where that section of that model I showed you with professional curiosity and collaboration, you can't have one without the other. And reflection. Do you have time to reflect? It's important not to accept that single piece of information at face value. You need to weigh up everything you're seeing. You need to seek confirmation of what people are saying and pick up on when there are discrepancies, and again, ask those why questions. Be aware of your own values without letting them influence your decision making, and be confident in your judgment. If you believe something to be as you believe it to be, then please don't be put off by a more highly qualified professional. I say that with tongue in cheek. Sharing your findings and concerns with colleagues and managers can help you to maintain that clear focus. And don't forget to think family. And that may be where there are children, but also other vulnerable people. So it may be that the carer of a family you're visiting is also a vulnerable person and has multiple issues that you need to be able to consider when you're offering a carer's assessment, because of course you would be doing that. So therefore, turn that all on its head and what enables professional curiosity. So person-centered care, making safeguarding personal. If you're doing that, you're more likely to gather information in a respectful and sensitive way. Make sure you set aside time and you've got the capacity to undertake your work, and do something if you haven't. Use supervision. What's the structure and working practices in your organisation? Now, since COVID, obviously, a lot of us are working remotely. I'm very remote at the moment on a Greek island, and I can do that. But that does mean I'm very isolated. What does your professional day look like? Is your organisation structure set up so that you have time to liaise with colleagues? I mean, pre-COVID, when we were all office-based, we would have those corridor conversations. You'd be making a cup of coffee in the kitchen or the refreshment area, and you'd be chatting and you'd say, oh, I saw Mrs. X yesterday and XYZ. We've lost some of that. Has your organisation allowed you to go back to having some of that? Do you have days of the week where you can do that? But then when you do that, are you hot desking where actually the people around you don't know and they're not in the same role as you? So have you lost some of that support that you get from that being in that hub, in that office? When you're writing things down, are you being clear about what is your gut feeling and what you're basing that on? Are you able to record how your curiosity is gathering information and what else you still need to do? Remember, if a safeguarding referral comes in, or you make a safeguarding referral and somebody else has seen that person, that information is useful. So record what you're seeing and what your feelings and thoughts are and the rationale about your decision making. Make sure you're accessing supervision and support. Make sure that you understand the legal and safeguarding literacy that supports you in the work that you do. Do you know when and where you can share information? Do you know what the safeguarding pathways are in your organisation and then in your locality? Are you getting opportunities for learning and development that helps increase your ability to be professionally curious? Are you working with an open culture, and are you encouraged to work in partnership? So difficult conversations that we talked about earlier, they're really at the heart of professional curiosity. So there is no easy answer, and it can be really difficult, but that's why you need that support and supervision and those conversations you have with colleagues. So tips on how to have some of those really difficult conversations. Plan in advance, ensure that you've got that time and that capacity. A rushed conversation is never going to give you what you're looking for. Keep the discussions focused on what you need to discuss. So go with a plan and be clear and concise about that plan. Know what you need to come out with at the end. And some people can steer you off track, and you need to question yourself, why are they steering me away from talking about that? Is there another way of having that conversation? If you have courage, so this is person-centered, and you focus on the needs of the person, they're more likely to talk to you about what their issues are. And also make sure that you're non-confrontational and non-blaming. So stick to the facts. So for example, if you're visiting someone and they've got 6 bottles of empty bottles of whiskey around their feet, don't talk to them about being an alcoholic. Talk to them about the empty bottles of whiskey that are around their feet. Say it as it is. Then you've got the evidence, and then you can open up a conversation about that. Make sure that you have justifiable and transparent decision making. So have the evidence to back up what you're saying. So if that person has drank 6 bottles of whiskey in the last year, you may not be so worried. If they've drank those 6 bottles of whiskey in the last 2 days, you may certainly have much more to worry about. But where else are you getting the evidence? Are they currently intoxicated? Are they showing signs of long-term alcohol use? But be empathetic. So be real and honest, and show empathy and consideration and compassion. Most people that you are seeing, when they're living in complex, difficult circumstances and need help and support, they don't necessarily want to be like that. They've often got to a point in their lives where things have become quite helpless, and they've lived like that for so long, they don't see a way of changing, and they don't see how your help and support and your nosiness and your questions are going to make a difference. So be real and honest, but also demonstrate congruence. Don't saying the right things while constantly looking at your watch and thinking about when you've got to leave. And also, don't be smiling at them and giggling or whatever when you're talking about something really serious. So just demonstrate that congruence about, how are you being with that person? And share with other professionals. So if you've got those gut feelings, you could say that to the person. You could say, what I'm seeing is, and then you can open up a conversation, and you can also talk to other professionals. But while you're doing that, be aware and understand the elements that need to happen for change. And change is huge for a lot of people. So, take it step by step and tell them that that's how we're going to work. Clarify exactly what you're saying, and also clarify back what they have just told you. So am I right in thinking that you've just told me? But apply that professional judgment and understand those complexities of disguised compliance. So are they saying all the right things but doing something completely different? And ask the obvious questions and go beyond and delve deeper. because that can really help you to understand a bit more about what's going on. And if you're struggling to have difficult conversations, see what more professional development you can do. Could you act out with a colleague? If you know you're going to have a difficult visit, could you do some role play with a colleague? Could you do some role play with a manager? Is your manager or your colleague, you know they're really good at having those difficult conversations? Learn from them, share your expertise. And if you're good at doing it, share how you do things with other colleagues. So remember, think the unthinkable, believe the unbelievable, and consider how you can articulate intuition into an evidenced professional view. Right, I'm going to stop sharing now.